One of the things that obviously comes from having a hobby that you're really into is collecting. And obviously most people that have watched my channel or has kept up with our podcast know that that is something that I really got kind of trapped in at some point, was collecting a lot of anime related stuff. And one of those things obviously is DVDs and Blu-rays. Now granted, when I first got into collecting anime, when I pretty much got my first job, DVDs were just coming in, so I don't really have much when it comes to VHS, but I do have a lot of DVDs and especially a lot of Blu-rays. So I thought I'd make a video that would go over my 10 most prized possessions when it comes to DVDs and Blu-rays. To put it in the context of that question we get a million times on our podcast, if there was a fire in your house, what would you grab? This is pretty much those. And this is in no particular order, so without further ado, let's jump into my 10 most cherished items that I have in my DVD and Blu-ray collection. Now keep in mind that a lot of these titles are older titles. This is nothing really kind of in the last couple of years because, as many know, I moved to doing YouTube on full time, and so my disposable income's not there anymore. So a lot of this stuff is kind of older titles that I just loved, and at the time, like I said, I had disposable income, so I kind of jumped to a lot of stuff, amassed this collection, and so it doesn't really grow anymore. I mean, like right now, besides the Evangelion Blu-ray set, I haven't really paid into anything just because, again, I'm trying to conserve that money. For my first item I have is Fate Stay Night Unlimited Blade Works, the Blu-ray set from Aniplex USA. Now, I will admit, and this is going to be the same thing I'll argue for pretty much 3 of these items on this list. There is an argument to be made that a lot of my cherishedness of these sets comes around to the fact that I paid a lot for them. And I will not disagree with that. That is the argument that I can have for pretty much all of my Aniplex USA stuff that's on the shelf up here in the back. So keep that in mind. But even still, one thing I do give Aniplex credit for is that when you buy a lot of their Aniplex titles, they limit how many episodes are on each disc. And thankfully what this does is allow for them to not have to compress the episode, and thus you don't get any kind of graininess to it. They're pretty raw when it comes to the masters on these Blu-rays. And when you have something beautiful like Ufutable's work on Fate Stay Night Unlimited Blade Works, it's really nice. Now again, to give it another kind of critique is, unfortunately, in a lot of cases for these releases, there's not much in here. But thankfully, the one thing I can give it is that this is a chipboard box. And when you have some releases like the Monogatari series where they have these very flimsy cases, it's nice to have something that's chipboard, has some incredible artwork on it. And it's definitely a series that I absolutely treasure, and yeah, I'll admit it's probably because I paid a lot for it. To dive into the second of my Aniplex titles, I have the Monogatari series. Yes, I went through and pretty much bought every single one of the Monogatari series, and I think a lot of that has to do with just the love of the series itself. It's a very timeless, it's a very classic series that I think is going to stand the test of time. When you have pretty much all these shows that come out these days, it's really hard to really see something as something that will have that timelessness that titles in the 90s had. And I think the Monogatari series is going to be one of those ones that even 10 years from now we'll be saying, yeah, go watch Monogatari series. That was an incredible series. Again, my issue that comes with this series is that it's very inconsistent when they want to use chipboard boxes. I love chipboard boxes. Thankfully, I think 2 of them came with chipboard boxes where the rest of them were just kind of sleeves. But even still, the quality on these are fantastic. They're literally like 1 or 2 episodes on each disc, which that on a Blu-ray is incredible because, again, lossless. It is a bummer that this doesn't have a dub for those that want a dub, but at the same time, I don't necessarily see this being a series that will get a dub just because of how heavy context, how heavy dialogue it is. Incredible. Love that I bought all of them, and like I said, it's a lot of them, so I think if of anything in my collection, collecting the entire Monogatari series was probably easily the one that has taken the most money out of me. And for the last of my Aniplex titles I have is Garden of Sinners. This is a series that is absolutely incredibly beautiful. It's a very interesting series, very different than what you get from most anime titles. Again, really awesome, really solid chipboard box that actually came with, which is a huge welcome for, again, Aniplex. It does come with a very small art book, which basically just has the artwork for the actual Blu-ray releases in Japan, because obviously they had a lot more individual ones. But yeah, it's a really great series, and I technically didn't feel so bad buying this one, just because if you equate it to how many movies, not TV series, movies you get from this, it's actually a really nice deal. So it's probably easily one of the least painful Aniplex titles for me to pick up, even though it was still pretty expensive. But again, Ufotable quality with not much compression is really nice. Moving away from Aniplex, we can move on. My next one I have is from Nozomi Entertainment. This was actually the Kickstarter for the Arya series, which, truth be told, I didn't really have any context to Arya. I just heard from a lot of people that was really good. And so when the Kickstarter came around, I decided to back it. And my backing it was just based on the fact that a lot of people that I trusted really loved the series. I had watched a couple episodes of it, but it's something I never really kept on. So seeing Nozomi Entertainment doing a justice on this series and getting a nice Blu-ray release of it, redubbing it and everything, I just had to jump aboard, and it was something that I felt passionate about. I trust Nozomi Entertainment as a company. I've worked with them for a long time, so to get that little information in there, I have done reviews for them for a long time, so I do have some sort of relationship with them. But it was something that I trusted so much that despite knowing that I'd probably get a review copy for this series, I backed it myself. Because again, I had so much trust in the people that were just blowing up about the series and saying that it's something that you cannot miss. And after finally getting it, and yes, getting a review copy as well, I ended up watching through the series and I absolutely loved it. It was a very beautiful series, very relaxing series, and having this really well done release done by it, when I've just recently just done a lot of backing for a lot of other companies and been completely disappointed, like Funimation's release of Escaflowne, which was just absolutely horrific, the way that they handled that one, Sekai Project and how they handle a lot of their stuff. It was very refreshing to have a company handling a Kickstarter that did it justice, and you don't see Kickstarter edition all over the darn thing. Moving on, we go back in time, way back in time, to one of my first purchases that I made of an anime series. Now, granted, when I got back into anime and I just got a job, one of the things I was doing was obviously at that time downloading a lot of series and watching a lot of series. And one that caught my attention really quickly, a series that I watched and I absolutely fell in love with it, was AirTV. Now, this is a series that might, for some people, seem like something of its time. You do have the whole, trapping of things like Clannad, where the eyes are huge. But when I watched the series originally, it was something that just totally destroyed me. It was a series that hit me emotionally with its storytelling and the stuff that it got into and the tragedy behind everything in the series. And so it was something that when I seen it up on some catalogs, I bought it. I jumped right in and got it. Now, to travel back in time and give you guys a little bit of history on this is actually one of those things that was interesting for its time. For those that don't know, typically these days, when you go to buy a season or something like that, you buy a complete box set, it comes all in one, and you buy it that way. Well, back in these days, they would actually, of course, release these by DVD. So you have this DVD right here, and this would carry 4 episodes, maybe even less than that in some cases. So this would be 4 episodes that you would buy. This would be the first chapter. 4 episodes. Crazy to think these days. And then they'll release a second DVD, and they'll release a third DVD. And then what you would have is you would have a release of the chip box set. This is what you would buy, would be the last DVD and the box. And then you would buy that and you would stick the rest of the titles in there. Very, very interesting for its time, but it was something that, again, I just jumped right onto. I bought the entire thing all in one. Thankfully, none of them were missing, because that's the unfortunate thing you'd run into, is that you'd go to buy the set and it was missing number 2 because they didn't have that one anymore. But I really do love that I bought this. It's something that I absolutely cherish because, again, I absolutely love this series and have a nice, yes, granted, it's... I don't think that I got it. I think I ended up getting it that way, where it's got a little bit of a bend right here, but it's not too bad. And it's, like I said, it's a series that I absolutely love, and I love it to death. Moving on to more crowdfunding related stuff. It's just a thing these days, unfortunately. But another company that does very well when it comes to these Kickstarters is Anime Ego. This is a company that I don't know personally, but at the same time, I've heard a lot of good things about how they handle their releases. And while I've never really jumped on anything that they have done before, one thing when I seen it pop up, I immediately jumped on board, and that's Gunsmith Cats. I absolutely loved Gunsmith Cats back in the day. This is another super nostalgia for me. I just love this gang. They were so great. And when I seen that they were going to do a proper Blu-ray release of it, I had to jump on board. And again, similar to that, having a good, solid release of it was something that I was all in for, especially since I knew that from a lot of people's perspective, they do a really fantastic job. It even came with they did an art book. It's really full of a ton of stuff. They also did some art cards for it, which is fantastic. I always like art cards. And just to get the series on Blu-ray is something I just look forward to. And especially since it's a series that's kind of disappeared at this point. that ability for that company, Anime Ego, to really go back and find a lot of these treasures titles from our childhood and bring them back and give them a proper Blu-ray release is just very much so welcome. Now, the next one's got a little bit of a story to it. For those that don't know, NIS America used to do a lot of anime releases in the West. Unfortunately for many, it was something that was kind of out of reach. A lot of their titles were more expensive but more grandiose. It's kind of like Ponycan that was doing for a while there. Similar to Aniplex of America, where they do a lot of high price releases, but at least for their favor, they were actually doing things interesting with their releases. And as I kind of seen the signs that they were getting away from anime, specifically their catalog, they weren't picking up new titles. A lot of their releases were getting more limited. A lot of their quantities were disappearing. One specific one that broke my heart was Katari, which I think is a fantastic series that needs a new release. So as I seen the writings on the wall, I decided since they had Cardcaptor Sakura, I wanted to get this series before it disappeared. Granted, I can see this being something that somebody later on will pick up and bring back, but I didn't want to take that chance. So I went ahead and grabbed the series, and I'm really happy that I did. Now, there's only one misgiving that I have for this series. It comes with a nice art book and everything. The chipboard box is nice. But the one thing I will say that I don't like is this capsule Blu-ray box, which makes zero sense. I guess it's frilly and interesting in that regard, but whoever was behind that choice, I don't know what to tell you. But at any rate, Cardcaptor Sakura was my Sailor Moon of that time. A lot of people love Sailor Moon for it being a magical girl. Cardcaptor Sakura was mine. This is the one that I loved, and this is the one I fell in love with. This is technically one of my favorite magical girls of all time. So yeah, a lot of nostalgia for this. I ended up rewatching through this before the Clear Card series came out, and I have to say, it just doesn't get any better than this. The Clear Card series did not really live up to this series, and this is the one that I loved, and I will always love it. We're almost to the end. I got a couple more and then an extra, but yes, my next one I have is Yukino as a Hero. Speaking of magical girls that I absolutely love, Yukino as a Hero is a special series for me. It's a series that when I first watched it shocked me because I didn't really know what to expect when I got into it. Obviously, we know now what it is, but at the time, we didn't really know. We didn't really have a synopsis that gave us a clear picture. And again, this is another one that I kind of regret a little bit because of the price. It's similar to Aniplex of America, where you're getting into a very expensive series. But at the same time, unlike Aniplex, Ponycan was a company that if you really loved a series, you couldn't go wrong. It was something that you could invest in, and yes, it costs a lot of money, but you had something special. You had something really special. Now, granted, putting this on your shelf alongside your typical Blu-rays is kind of harsh, but if you can find a spot to put it, it's, like I said, it's a collectible. And when you get in a series like Yukino as a Hero, where the artwork is its thing, like the gorgeous artwork that they had in this series is just, it's hard to find anywhere, that you're going to get something special here because you're not just getting a series, you're getting a lot of collectibles, a lot of things that you're going to cherish because, I mean, golly, the artwork on this series. And they managed to put that in the backing of everything. So you have this huge, humongous artwork to go along with it. You have all these art cards to go along with it that are big as well that you can frame. I mean, there's a lot to be had here. And like I said, when they came to series that weren't that special, like at the time, I think when they finally got out of doing releases, one of the things that they were running into was that they had Roko Brave of Six Flowers. And that was a series that I don't think many people loved that much, to spend that much money on it. So they never got the pre-orders for it. So they decided to cancel it. Because that's the problem that you run into when you have something that's so collectible, something that's so designed for this, small core of people that would be willing to pay that much for something. So it just doesn't work in the end. But even still, back to Yukino. I love this series. I got all 3 of the first season. I am a little sad that now, since Ponycan got out of this, 2nd season and the 3rd season, the Monkai chapter, are all going to be basically probably regular standard Blu-rays. But I'm still glad I got the series because this is technically my favorite of the series. Like, the 1st season was phenomenal. I have my issues with the 2nd and 3rd season, but this is the one that was just perfect. It has a special place in my heart. It hit me in ways that I did not expect. So it's something I just love. Jumping back to NIS America again, and again, similar to Ponycan's releases. NIS America had a habit of making some very strange releases. And again, it was something that I cherished because it's something that I love so much, but I can see it being something that's very odd for some people to pick up because of the awkwardness of it. But again, similar to the Ponycan releases, if it's something you really treasure, this is a collectible. This is something unique that I absolutely love. But yes, my next one is Hanasake Roha, if you have not guessed it by now. This is literally my favorite anime of all time. I think I've yet to find something that I'm going to put in that number one spot. Not that I think the story or anything is better than certain things, but more so because of it from a personal perspective. This show, at the time, hit me. It hit me in a personal way, and it was something that I needed at the time of my life, to watch this story about somebody essentially finding something they love in life, finding that treasure, finding something and enjoying something in your life. And it was just at the right time, and I just love it to death. And so to get this crazy release from NIS America is a welcome thing. And again, it's not going to be for everybody, because some people are just going to want a regular Blu-ray of it or something like that to put on their shelf. Not necessarily a huge box, especially 3 of them. So yeah, it's huge. But I love these releases. Like, similar to with the Yukino is a Hero, having something, your favorite anime of all time, get a huge release of this with some fantastic artwork in it is just, it's great. It's I couldn't ask for more. And there is a lot of great artwork for this series, and for them to really kind of compose it on a lot of these boxes the way they did, it looks incredible. Not only just the Blu-ray, but you also they come with art books and everything like that, which are really great as well. They're really huge. It's got a nice soft backing to it. So now, granted, they're not incredible books, because a lot of these are just really synopsis of the episodes and stuff, but they're still good, and they still have a lot of character art in there as well, which I do find is great. But yeah, I absolutely love this series, and I'm so glad that I got this and picked it up, because again, it's something special. And that's the annoying thing, is because another series that NIS America had, and I mentioned it earlier, another series that NIS America had was Katana Katari. Katana Katari is an absolutely beautiful artistic show. And it had a release just like this, these large boxes and everything, and I missed it. I missed it, and I still to this day regret it, because one, I love Katana Katari, but not only that, but I love it enough that I want something special like this. And even if somebody else does eventually pick up the series, it's not going to get a release like this, and it's something that I still regret to this day, and they are just, the price on them are astronomical. All right, that gets us down to my last one. I'll have another additional extra, but that's really just more a fun one. But my last one that I have, this is something I think if anybody has watched our podcast or my live streams will know that this is probably in the list. And that is my Evangelion, the original DVD box set. This isn't the platinum one or whatever I think they had. This is the original DVD box set, and it is something that I have treasured to this day. I'm so glad I picked it up. Now, granted, one of the reasons why I'm so happy I picked it up when I did was because we never seen really a release of this series since those 2 box sets that they did. And so there was a thought at some point for a long time, probably a good 20 years now, that this would never see another release in the West officially. But as we found out, and we'll see in about a week when I get my Blu-ray of it, that didn't stay that way. But even still, I love this, because this is kind of a treasure of its time. This is a release that I've watched so many times. I'm so glad I picked it up. It's similar to the whole situation with AirTV, just something that I had watched. I loved it to death. It was actually something my friend showed me, and I loved it to death. And so when I finally got a job of my own, I just jumped to getting the whole DVD set at once. And I think at the time it was really expensive at the time. I kind of wish that I had a snippet of what I paid for it, but I do know it was in the hundreds, and back then it was quite different for $100 than it is now, obviously. But it is a treasure, and I'm so glad I picked it up, and I'm glad that I kind of kept it in good condition. I mean, there is some wear and tear on the corners here, so it's kind of bumped itself now and then, but it's just a classic series. I love it to death, and I just cannot say enough how much this box set itself means so much to me. This is literally the first of all of my collection that I actually bought. I mean, I did trade my friend for like 2 VHSs a long time ago, but this was like the first thing of my Blu-ray and DVD collection that I bought. This is the first one. This is what started all of this up on my upper shelves, is Evangelion. This was the start. This was at the beginning of the shelf. Everything else built from there. And of course, I also have Death and Rebirth and all that kind of stuff, but this is where it was at. I love this to death. And finally, a bonus one. Yes, I did 10, but this is my bonus one. This is my Shana series. I absolutely love Shakuna no Shana. This is a series that literally introduced me to Ria Kajimiya, a seiyuu that I have fell in love with. I love her works. I've always been following everything that she does. Unfortunately, she's not really around much anymore. So Aoyuki has kind of taken the throne away from her, but she was one of the first seiyus that, she actually is the first seiyu that actually kept an eye on and watched throughout her career as she did a lot of titles. And yes, her whole shtick is tsunderes. Whenever there's a tsundere of a series, she's just that voice. She is a tsundere voice. But yeah, I love this series. I loved it a lot, and I decided that I wanted to go pick it up. Now, the unfortunate thing is that I was late to the game on picking up this series, and for those that don't know, when you're late to a series and it's Funimation, what do you run into? The save labels. The most horrific, I don't know who thought of this idea that somebody would want a save label just sticking out and glaring. It's almost like it's saying, if this is on your shelf and somebody walks by, it's like, cheap, cheap. Like, there's nothing about collectability with a gigantic save label. And granted, thankfully for a lot of them, they were doing just these little cover sleeves. But in a lot of cases, what you had to do is you had to actually flip your inner sleeve on your Blu-ray case because it was, this horrific sign on there. But I love this series a lot, and I picked up this series. The interesting thing that came of it is I didn't want to settle for this. I seen this and I wasn't happy. I'm like, I want this series in a respectable way. So I actually scoured the internet, ended up finding any chipboard boxes that I could find of this series and to replace them. And I thankfully found the second season and the third season in some sort of, chipboard box that were decently looking, considering I had to get it secondhand at that point. But I've yet to find the first season. And so I don't know if they did a chipboard box release of the first season, but I've been looking for it and I can't seem to find anybody really selling it for a decent price. But it's something I've been searching for. I don't know that there's necessarily one for the OVA in the movie. I doubt it, but I'm still looking for that first season. But that's my recent goal, was to do that. And I've done pretty well, like I said, being able to pick up pretty much all of them but the first season. And I'm just glad to have this on my shelf because, like I said, I love Shauna, and this is something that I really cherish and I wanted on my shelf. But that's it. That's my most cherished DVDs and Blu-rays that I have. I love them to death. They're just, again, things that if there was a fire, there's a lot of things I'd grab before that. I'm not that crazy about my collection, but it's definitely something that I would consider grabbing. I think if anything, it would probably be a lot of figures that are upwards of the $200 to $300 mark that I'd probably grab first, but there's just some of them that are just not really, they're collectibles, and they're things that I don't think you can find anymore. They're things that just are classics, and they're stuff that I really do want to, keep safe. And I've been trying to keep a lot of them safe. Like I said, kind of with the whole deal with Neon Genesis Evangelion, which is a series that I've been protecting for literally the last, 20 years, I guess it would be, 21 years. And I'm glad I did because it's something that's special. It's timeless, and I love it to death. Just hope that the DVDs don't decay. That's technically an issue that they will face eventually, unfortunately. But anyways, that's my run through of my favorite stuff. Let me know down in the comments what your most cherished DVD or Blu-ray is. If you like this video, definitely hit that like down below. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share this video if you can. Support us on Patreon or in the tips link in the description below. We definitely appreciate everybody that does, and y'all take care.